There is blind justice, and then there is trading justice, so that you can finally afford to get that laser eye surgery. Not only will people find you more attractive once you ditch those old glasses, you'll be able to see your charts better. That's what we call win-win. Speaking of winning, it's time for a little trading justice, brought to you by TackleTrading.com.
Welcome back to the Trade Just Podcast. My name is Matt Just, and I'm your host, along with my co-host, Tim Justice. Tim, how are you today?
You know, I'm doing pretty good. I was just debating how long we should let the intro go. You know, sometimes we let it go like 45 seconds, sometimes 15. I think it's a good indicator of your mood, by the way.
Really? And if I let it go past welcome, I think it's welcome back. If I go let it past that, what does that say about my mood? Or short from that?
I'd have to go back and do some scientific research and
That's
some statistical analysis and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
but I think the shorter you go, the more excited you are about the guest we have on.
Well, I didn't go that short this time, so I must not be that excited. By the way, I think that has absolutely nothing to do with my thing. I think you think I'm ornery, and I'm not, by the way. Tired, yes. Ornery, no.
Yeah, you've been sick too, right?
A little bit. You know, nothing bad. I haven't been puking or anything. I just have, I think I'm just tired. You know, just tired. Nothing a great night's sleep that I don't wake up at 4 in the morning will cure. I think I'm doing too much day trading. I think that might be it.
You know, dude, you ebb and flow with that stuff. We've been trading for a long time. And sometimes you're in a groove and you want to be up at 4 a.m. with the European markets and that kind of thing. And other days you want to wake up at 8 and let the stock market open. Yeah. I mean, it just depends on the time of year, too, and the volatility. I think right now, one of the reasons why you're getting up so early is because the action in the market right now. You know, here we are early January 2015. There's a lot of volatility, and so you're trying to respond to that.
There's a tremendous amount of volatility, and you know, there's a lot of movement out there in the marketplace. By the way, I just made 2-day trades just to let you know. Bought the Australian dollar, sold the US dollar. I'm in the trade, I don't know, 5 minutes, up about $100, nothing much. Sold the yen-dollar pair, so sold the dollar-yen. And some must have just came out just barely because both of them spiked. Probably going to close out on the yen, though.
Well, the Japanese markets, the banks just opened a half an hour ago, so
yeah, but it was just like 5 minutes. I wonder if it was like some type of economic report or something along those lines, because it literally was just 5 minutes, and both of them spiked the same way in terms of their movement. And I'm looking at the reports right now, and there's nothing really coming out today. You know, in terms of the economic, sometimes you just see this, to be perfectly honest with you. Sometimes you just see the market just really drive one way or the other. And it's a little weird that way, but yeah, nothing, no intermediate reports, no really big reports. It really just kind of started fading more than anything.
You know, for the audience out there, I want you to focus on a couple of things here that are really, really important. Number one, Matt saw some volatility in the market, wasn't sure where it was coming from, so he instantly went and checked the economic calendar. Mm-hmm. When you're trading, especially when you're day trading, you're going to be checking stuff all the time. You're going to be bouncing back and forth. That's where I saw your monitor set up, Matt. It's pretty slick.
Yeah.
What do you got, 6?
No, I still got the 3. But I'm looking to go to 6. I think that might be small man syndrome, though. I'm not saying I have it. God, that sounded horrific.
Small man.
That is. No, I meant. Never mind. Maybe. No, I can't. I got to stop now. I want to bring in Robert the Bruce Shannon. Robert, are you there, buddy?
Yes, sir, I am. How you guys doing?
Doing fantastic. I want to kind of introduce Robert Shannon here. Robert, I've known Robert now, and we're just going to refer to him as Bobby. I hope his grandmother never listens to this. She might kill me. But
she does not like that.
No, she didn't. She looked at me very, very bad when I met her for the first and only time about a few weeks back. And I'll tell Tim about that story here in just a second. You can kind of tell him about who your grandmother is and who your grandmother's friends with, Bobby, because I find that highly interesting and entertaining. But
yeah, she's never short of surprises. During that our little get together, she was doing her travelogues and current Christmas card, and on there was a little caption, and it mentioned that none of her family happened to be around for her birthday, so she had her good friend Dr. Henry Kissinger come out for her birthday and hang out with her for the afternoon.
This is Bobby's family. That's who Bobby's family hangs out with. The Dr. Henry Kissinger, obviously, famous Secretary of State and whatnot. And I remember, Tim, I've known Bobby for a while now, probably about 6 months now, Bobby?
Roughly
about 6 months. So I've known Bobby for a while now, but just recently, Bobby joined my team. And he travels with Rich Dad and myself, and he's getting out there and he's learning how to trade. And we're teaching him. He's attending Master Trader through Rich Dad Education right now, and he's starting to really kind of get the itch about wanting to get out there and start trading. And we'll certainly talk about that. But one of the reasons why I wanted to add Bobby to my team was not for the stories and the fun we have, Bobby, although that's entertaining in itself, but because Bobby, Bobby, you're a young guy, 28-year-old guy, but tell Tim, because Tim doesn't know you the way I do. Tell us just, the high level, autobiography, so to speak.
Well, so I did undergrads in Nebraska, and then graduate school was in New Zealand at the University of Auckland. My bachelor's was in philosophy, and when I was in grad school in New Zealand, I had the great opportunity to work with Dr. Thomas Pogue on a kind of new ground of economics, the philosophy of economics. Not only is it like an introductory portion to economic majors and soon-to-be economists, but more specifically, it was the moral element and very theoretical, but specifically oriented towards system design.
Mm-hmm. And Bobby,
so,
real quick, when you say system design for the Trade Justice listeners out there, what does that mean? System design.
Well, specifically, every economic theory or model that is implemented globally, whether it be pure capitalism or let's say socialism, Marxism, of the various theories, there's always a system, which is typically just a series of mathematical equations. And what we do specifically is we analyze those equations, we reverse engineer and put them into symbolic logic, and thus English. And we just analyze them not only from a human element, but we also try to throw moral and ethical implications into these mathematics. And one thing that we picked up on, which I found very interesting, a man actually named Marshall McLuhan clued onto this one, is that, well, our base system designs are all open system design. However, we live in an isolated system, a closed system. And the mathematics thus don't reflect what reality is. What I mean specifically is that we live on a planet. Our planet has an atmosphere. We float around in the solar system, which our solar system floats around the galaxy. We're a very isolated element. So, these mathematics, these equations should, at some point, have a spatial variable running through the series, a function per se. And the reason why is, well, as mentioned, it's open system design, but when you're operating in a closed system, the second law of thermodynamics comes into play, which dictates that in isolated systems, only entropy can exist. So we essentially start seeing a lot of side effects, negatives that come from this open system design. First was globalization. However, we had greatly benefited from globalization. We're starting to see a lot of its qualms, things that never really came to pass. For example, the environment. We're becoming very, very good at exploiting the environment because we do not operate or, let's say, sustain our immediate environment. We go to other countries.
Hey, Bobby, let me jump in there real quick. When you talk about the environment from an open system and whatnot, and your emphasis was on, maybe I'm not saying this the right way, but you can kind of correct me if I'm not. Your emphasis from an economic system, open design system, was on the morality of economics. Is that true?
Well, yes. More so just questioning the morality of efficiency.
Yeah.
In these equations, efficiency is, essentially input divided by output. And then if you want to tack on a system onto it, it's times it by surplus labor or divided by surplus labor, just depending on what model you want to go off of.
Yeah.
Now, what we would do with the morality element is we quantified essentially the current world order. We wanted to give light to the reason why that 1/3 of the world's population was below the poverty line. When we have a system set up that is pumping trillions upon trillions of dollars, and there, should be no reason why 1/3 of the world's population lives under this poverty line. And what we discovered is that because of the system and its math, it was in interest of, in particular, 11 certain nations to maintain the status quo and have, let's just say, a labor force for the most part, a land of cheap natural resources, a land of cheap labor, which is why we know the term outsourcing so well.
Mm-hmm.
And then, when you just throw in our current model, which is Keynesian economics, which for the most part dictates, in times of market crisis, we have a robust intervention. Now, in the short run, this is great for, by influencing aggregated demand in the economy, which is the total spending in the economy. However, it doesn't necessarily reflect the productive capacity of the economy by any means whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, heralds a host of certain factors that, causes our marketplaces to behave erratically, thus affecting production, employment, and inflation. Inflation is a key factor. I mean, this is why never before in American history has our work been such unnatural activity. We work harder for less, and really what it costs to live costs more.
Yeah.
Thus, as you know, Matt, that's a problem with Keynesian economics, is as it does influence aggregate demand. It's very slow on raising wages. The middle class or the working class they have not received a increase in pay, compared to inflation for that matter since 1989?
Yeah, I believe the last time we saw that was 1989.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's three certain. I mean, let's just go back to the basics here.
Can I cut in here for a second?
Let's bring Tim in for just 1 second.
First of all, I can think of a certain group of people that worked harder for less pay for most of our history, actually, from about the early 1600s to 1865. But that goes into a different debate and conversation. They're slaves in the South. That's what I'm getting at there, Bobby. But the thing about it is, when we're talking economy here, I got disconnected there for a minute. I'm very fascinated. I've been back in the conversation for about 5 minutes. I'm kind of listening. So this was your thesis, is that right?
No, I was doing the research on the thesis of Dr. Thomas Pogue. The book in particular is called World Poverty, Human Rights. Very, very fantastic book. It's part economics and then part philosophy. The philosophical element is essentially we introduce the idea, okay, how do we mitigate this fault of our system without changing the system to the point where it collapses economies, disrupts governments, and could end in chaos? Well, he said, simple amendments. Let's add a spatiality function to the math, which will incentivize any economic decision to be spatially oriented. For example, during the stimulus package with Obama, we had a portion allotted for the world's largest wind farm, which was to be built in North Texas and what have you. And the irony of it, and you can see how this plays out, is all that money went to China to construct these windmills, ship them across the ocean to our coast, have it shipped to the site, constructed on the site. When all in all, there was a GE factory that made the exact same windmills 100 miles from the site. Economically, it made more sense, was more cost-effective and more lucrative for them to build them in China. Now, what this does to the isolated system theory is that, I mean, look at the carbon footprint we made just for, saving a few pennies. But if you mathematically incentivize spatiality, consuming within 100 miles or producing within 100 miles, that decision to have them built in China would have made absolutely no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, and so do you see? Do you have a personal political problem with that? Do you think that that's like a mistake from the president, that he went to China to find a cheaper solution, even based on the global economics, or do you look at it and say we've got to fix global economics, so this isn't the solution?
That's the latter right there. The former, I don't, I'm not involved in politics or my own personal opinion. Everyone's afforded their opinion, but no one's afforded fact. Fact is just reality. That's what it is, and these are mathematical facts. To amend the economy, I have no idea. I mean, there's people far more intelligent than me that are working on that, and I don't think they've ever come to a conclusion on changing economics. But we can make moral amendments to things. For example, like I was talking about earlier about the 1/3 of the world's population living below the poverty line. Mr. Pogue came up with an amendment to the problem. He said, well, these 11 particular countries that are running the game, at least economically, let's make a $3.50 tax per barrel of oil. He called it the global resource dividend, which to final consumption, the consumer at the gas pump per se, this tax is completely unnoticeable. It's fractions of a cent. However, that money, and distributed correctly to one already established charitable funds and some theoretical speculative organizations, should be more than enough money to bring that 1/3 of the world's population out of poverty to a point where they can have electricity, running water, safe food, and education. Which
it gets back to a very interesting part of this whole conversation, and I want to believe me, I could listen and we can talk. In fact, we're going to enjoy this conversation a lot. That you have to ask a central question whenever it comes to philosophy, economics, social theory, whatever it is. My background is in political science and sociology. That's what I I did all of my studies in, and those are the kind of people that I hung around. I still have a lot of friends who have doctorates and all that kind of thing that do that type of stuff. And I think that at the core, you have to take the zeitgeist angle and ask yourself, do the people in charge making decisions actually want to help these people we're talking about, right, Bobby? And I don't want to offend your grandma, so I'm going to call you Robert. Right, Robert? By the way, Robert, Bobby, Rob, Bert, there's 10 different ways that you could spin that name, right?
Oh, it's a bisexual name. You can go both ways on it for sure. The reason why Robert is because I'm named after her father, and so she holds to it. Majority of people call me Bob, but just like you said it to him, nailed it right on the head. Yeah.
Well, the thing I'm sitting here thinking as you're talking, and I'm thinking, okay, yeah, a $3.50 tax on oil, or some other solution through the IMF, or some other solution to where these people who have some, at some core level, though, we're getting back to a Marxist conversation. Do the people with power and wealth ever really want to allow policy to happen that's going to distribute that wealth, whether it's within a system like a country,
take it even one step further than
that system globally?
Yeah,
Matt, go ahead.
Well, Bobby, would you say, based on this 1/3 of the world being in poverty, would you say in from an economic theory perspective, open system, however we want to categorize it, would you say there is a moral responsibility of the industrialized nations to aid the impoverished nations?
See, that is the whole point of the economic, the moral question to the economics, because economically, the Western world, or let's say these 11 leading economies, have no interest whatsoever of bringing that 1/3 of the world's population out of poverty. Economically, it'd be disastrous on many, many, many levels. But and that's what Thomas was trying to do is show that every citizen in these countries is morally culpable. That was his argument. He gives the evidence, the numbers, to show that yes, you're going to lose a lot of money, but you should do this because you are being a bad person if you're not. Now he as he does propose that, and he's essentially just incentivizing charitable contributions to the underdeveloped world. He's also trying to bring forth a point that, aside from writing a check or what have you, you can do things in your own life that will bring you out of this and thus take you away from that culpability. I mean, for example, he brings this notion called the society of job holders, and essentially is that we have allowed people to abandon their individuality and behave as if they're simply a function, instead of tackling head-on the troubles of living and truly thinking and acting for themselves. Simply because, we become a passive reflection of our environment, more so like...
No, I heard the bell. Hold on a second. I heard the bell. That means you're out. No. I thought it was a 10 count, Matt. Was that a 10 count, or what was that?
No, that was not. I was getting ready for drop.
He 10 counted you, Bobby. He said, listen, Bobby, you're running on way too long. I'm not as smart as you. Now I got to 10 count you and bell you out. Listen, get in the corner. I'm going to bell you off. We'll come back.
The pen controls the power. No, I want to continue the discussion. Just want to hurry and do a quick little drop. You've been listening to the Trading Justice podcast presented by Tackle Trading. You can check out Tackle Trading at tackletrading.com. And I want to do a little bit of a quick little video. Not video, but audio. So let's listen to it.
The Bulls versus the Bears. Get in the game. www.tackletrading.com.
Now, wasn't that good? Yes. Come on now.
No, she sounds way better than you do, Matt.
Hey, that's why we have it, right? So I wanted to drop that one for the first time.
She sounds way better than you do. I like that a lot.
Oh yeah.
Now, Bobby, let's get back to this. I apologize for my brother. He doesn't know how to use his own mouse. He drives it around on his desk like he's drunk. Let's talk about a couple of things here, because we're getting back to morality. I mean, we're opening up so many Pandora's boxes. You're moral if you do this. You're moral if you do that. I mean, I can to take an example away from economics, not all the way away from economics for a minute. I recycle. I'm willing to recycle. I understand the need to recycle. Yeah. In fact, I recycle my bottles. I separate them out. I feel like I'm doing what I can, but yet out west of me, 5 miles, there's a dump of trash, and there's a big old heap in West Salt Lake. I can't necessarily solve the problem from an individual level, and so when it gets back to morality on the individual level, I think people have a hard time, like, even absorbing that. Not that you're wrong or they're wrong or whatever.
Yeah, Tim,
but it almost like, am I sure it's going to translate?
Real quick, I mean, if let's take from an individual perspective then. If you are well off, regardless of where you live, let's say you made your money in business and you made $1 billion on this IPO, and you just, you're a very established individual. Do you have a responsibility to give back to the community? Do you have a responsibility to give back to charities?
Absolutely, and essentially that's the end of my point is, we got to move from just being these mere consumers with tastes and preferences to one, re-implementing ourselves in terms of action, taking our lives directly into our hands and becoming producers. Mm-hmm. I mean, believe it or not, choosing environmentally and also morally costs money. Yes. Our system is not designed for that. Most of us can only afford to shop at, Weimar or Walmart, or things that may not have the best environmental or third world stewardship, for that matter. Which is why I like trading, because trading gives me the opportunity to utilize my immediate environment to its mass profit for the most part. Mm-hmm. Working from home is not too destructive on a variety of different levels, and then Also, I can take from companies I may not necessarily, agree with. I can also, increase my wealth to where I can get to that point to give back. But what it comes down to is, as a base consumer, now I can choose how to consume. I can afford to shop at farmers market, whereas before it was going to be buy mart and buy mart only.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
it's
just about moving from helplessness into a realm of choice. Choose how to guide your life.
I absolutely 100% agree with what you said from an individual perspective. But isn't that where you get into kind of the gray areas, where you're talking about from a individual choice versus a design factor? When you make it a design, you go into government design. You go into, what the World Bank is doing. You go into what the IMF is doing. You go into those top 10 industrialized nations, industrialized economies. If you force it from a design perspective, doesn't that make it less efficient?
Well, upon this model, the design changes, at least on the institutional levels that you were speaking of, would be more local government, more individual choice, less federal government, less regulation on substantive sectors of the economy, and probably, in my personal opinion, more regulation on the financial sector. Because that's what, for the most part, caused our current recession and our re-implementation of Keynesian economics on a very grand scale and a very dangerous scale. Was financial deregulation for the most part.
Yeah, no, I agree, and Tim and Bobby, both of you know the LDS Church very well, and I'm not LDS, and I know Tim's not, and you're not, Bobby, but at the same time, we understand that religion.
Wait a sec, I'm on the wrong. What are you talking about? I'm not. Don't say what I am and I'm not.
You're born, whatever. Okay, we're all born into the LDS community. Fantastic. Anyways,
dude, I think of LDS like being just of a tribe. So I definitely still think of myself that way. I work in Utah. I still get visited by the missionaries and everything. So absolutely, you can call me LDS. I have no problem with that.
Okay. When was the last time you went to church?
I don't go to church.
Being LDS is like being a gypsy with a mortgage.
So don't get all offended when I say you're not LDS when you don't practice, you don't go to church, and you don't live in any capacity in LDS lifestyle. So you can sit there and get all up in arms all you want. Okay, my point remains. But what I was going
those underwear look comfortable, dude.
They do.
You got it.
Okay, what I was going to say is this: from an LDS community standpoint, that is one of the richest organizations out there. But they're also one of the most well-known organizations to really take care of their own, from a donation, from a charitable standpoint, from as Bobby's talking about this morality and whatnot in terms of well-off individual or company or corporation or government or design, I think it can work from many different levels. I just think there is a gray area when you do it from a design economic perspective at the central banking level or at the IMF level or government level. Where do you really kind of draw that line? I just see so many massive inefficiency type scenarios.
Yeah, and for the most part, it all comes down to the math. I mean, these equations are getting so incredibly advanced and being amended on a monthly basis that. Now one individual really can keep up with it. I mean, if you know the inner workings of the Fed well enough, you know that more so, influential than the Fed chair is going to be his assistant. Because his assistant, he does all the math. Fed chair, what he does is he translates it into a human institution, into like, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, but in English.
If anything the Fed said was in English, yes, I would agree. I want to shift the conversation real quick, and I want to kind of talk about, from an economic perspective, design perspective, kind of the three economic models that have been predominant in U.S. history, and that would be the classic liberal, the neoliberal, as well as the Keynesian economics. Kind of, Bobby, talk to the listeners out there about what a classic liberal is and what really kind of influenced the founding economy of our nation.
Well, the classic liberal, for the most part, is like I was saying earlier, very local governed, very micro level oriented, very little influence on the powers that be or centralized influence, for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
So the best way I like to explain it is via self-interest and social equality. Social equality, because there has to be a level playing ground, heralds in just more rules for the most part, more regulation, more intervention. It's kind of like a mother-like relationship where, things go wrong, you go screaming to mom, and mom's, going to be there to take care of you, and at a very high price, for that matter.
Yeah.
It's mom, But the other level, the self-interest, the father-like approach is you're kind of left to your own devices. Good job, son. You made it to 18. Go out in the world. If things aren't going to work out very well, too bad. However, we live in our contemporary society is a little bit of mix, hence the neoliberal element.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the classical, it was very, American dream oriented, self-interest oriented.
Yeah, and kind of, I love that explanation, kind of the mother-father explanation, where the father is like, you know what, go get a job, pick yourself up by the bootstraps, go work hard, pick up your self-interest, get better in life. The mother's more coddling, so to speak. But I certainly, coming back to the whole system design aspect, and Tim and Bobby, I want you to talk about this from a classic liberal perspective. In my understanding of Adam Smith, John Locke, and really kind of the 17th century economic philosophers that influenced American economic theory, there was a morality to it, correct?
Absolutely. It was entirely predicated on three phrases: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Mm. Tim, what's your thoughts, Tim?
Well, honestly, my thoughts are very complicated, and I think that's the point. It's interesting when you're in an intellectual setting and when you can really dig in and dive in. Like, let's say that you're at law school, or you're studying to become a doctor, and you're in med school, and you're taking biology, and you're taking advanced chemistry or economics here, and you're diving into one topic. You can start to look at things through a framework. In fact, I think that happens intentionally. Intellectuals, they tend to try to create this framework. Mm-hmm. These are the rules of the game, right? This is the coding. And if we can operate in this framework, then we can figure out the solution to this problem. Problem is, the world doesn't operate in a framework. Even some of the basic things that we're drawing assumptions on so far in the conversation are kind of pulling me away. Like the fact that there's a moral obligation. I mean, we could spend our entire life trying to define morality, and we would not be able to do it.
Yeah.
The fact that there is some kind of human obligation to doing something for their fellow man. Now, anybody who knows me, by the way, would know that I'm like the softest guy you know. I'm a sarcastic ass. I say inappropriate things, but when it comes down to it, I'm a soft-hearted guy. Matt, anyway, I don't want to tell stories. I could tell stories all day. But I come from an Eastern philosophy perspective in that regard, that I do believe that I would choose to give to help any system, right? I think these ideas, I'm sitting here nodding my head. But then I'm also thinking about it pragmatically from somebody who's been out of a specific kind of think tank type of environment for a long time, for a decade. And I'm like, but there's 3 billion people that don't have access to clean water.
Theory and application are two different discussions. You look at the design of the system, the classic liberal out there, by all understanding, I mean, we all agree that classic liberalism is a fantastic economic theory, is a fantastic design, both in terms of pick your bootstrap, tie your bootstraps a little tighter and pick yourself up, rub some dirt on it, go get the job done. But at the same time, I do believe there was a morality to our economic theory. And also, whenever you have an economic system or design or theory, you will always get to a scenario where it plays too far. Does that make sense? Where you have the industrialization where people are taken advantage of.
And, to be honest with you, I agree what's implicit of Tim's comment. For sure, I follow Ayn Rand in that I think any time where distribution of wealth is forced upon a society by a centralized, distributing agency, i.e. the government, It stifles innovation. It just ruins the whole thing. It actually creates the indentured servitude that it's fighting to protect against. But like I was talking about earlier with the system design element, the spatiality function, we do have to find a way to mitigate the fact that we essentially set up the underdeveloped world as either our proving grounds for cheap GM-oriented agriculture or, like coltan, for example, which is in every smartphone in the world, which is directly responsible for a series of genocides and modern-day slavery. We have to figure out a means of implementing this, not implementing, but redesigning our system to where we're no longer causing those grievous harms. I mean, the amendment, the short-term solution, the prescriptive solution is to throw money at the situation, but we all know that doesn't work out half the time, if very rarely it does. If we did have to, for all set and purposes, fix the system, that spatiality function, where any economic decision is first based upon the idea that all assembly products would be done, I think the figure is about 150 miles from its producing location. What you do with it from there, if you ship it across the country, slightly different story, but at the least you won't be incentivized to, a big chain store like Walmart to, set up its big agricultural regions in, the savannah of Africa or what have you. That's, in short, what Thomas was getting at.
So much there, obviously, and very interesting. Robert, I guess Bobby. I got to come up with my own nickname, I think, Matt. I actually got to meet you in person to come up with a good nickname for you. I only got one rule with nicknames, Bobby, is that you can't nickname yourself. Anybody who nicknames themselves, they lose their their self dignity, I think. Yeah.
That's absolutely true. 100% true.
Yeah, there was this kid that I went to college with, and he's actually a radio producer here in Salt Lake City, Utah. And I won't even drop his name, but he gave himself his own radio nickname just because he thought it sounded cool in college. And he'd be like, "Hey, this is Bibadoo from the radio." And I'm just like, dude, no, somebody's got to give you the nickname. But anyway.
Is it bad Brad Wheeler, perchance?
No, Richie T, X96.
Thought you weren't going to name drop.
I just did. Sorry. It's a podcast. If he listens to it, I hope he does. He's actually right across the street. I'm right by the Broadway Media Building. That's where my office is downtown in Salt Lake City, Utah. Hey, but Bob, back to your thought. I mean, there are several things there, Matt, and I don't want to run off on it for long because there's so much more I want to talk about with Bobby.
And we're going to have multiple podcasts with Bobby, being kind of my economic guru out there. And Tim, are you kind of seeing why I put Bobby on my team? I mean, just
absolutely. That's what I was just going to say. I mean, here's an example on a large scale of what we do on a small scale, Matt. We talk about this all the time, that you have to build a team.
Yep.
Okay. On a large scale, there's a problem. There's a problem in this world with economics. Whether you take the zeitgeist angle from it, whether you take the Matt Justice angle from it, whether you take the systems angle from it, whatever angle you want to take, you understand there's a problem with disparity of wealth in the way that people control capital. Now, there are so many nuances in there, and we'll talk about them quite a bit, but at some level there's a huge problem, and Bobby identified it. How do you fix this, right? Mm-hmm. Well, the economist will say, well, if I can figure out the math in this system and then tax it, I can come up with some kind of solution. Well, it doesn't necessarily work. How do you get the information out to people to support it? Well, then you need media, right? Mm-hmm. And you need social changers. You need people who can pound the desk. You need people who can inform. Then you need a populace to actually kind of rise up.
Let's talk real quick, though, because I agree with what you're saying. But when you look at the economic models that we really have dominated the last 220 years, you had the classic liberal that really kind of lasted up until the 1930s. That was from the founding fathers until the 1930s, where you had this that Ma and Pa type economic theory that Bobby was talking about. Out of that, you started bringing in Keynesian economic theory, where government started doing the aggregate demand, and because demand started going down in recessions, that lasted really until the 70s. But you look at the classic liberal thing, kind of got out of hand during the industrialized age, and people were being taken advantage of, and workers primarily and whatnot. But in the Keynesian economic standpoint, it led to massive hyperinflation, as well as economic stagnation type of scenario. And then in the early 1980s, 82 on till 2007, you really had the neoliberal. And so we've talked a little bit about Keynesian. Keynesian is basically, in recessions, depressions, and whatnot, when times are tough, you basically have government step in. They control the demand, which means they step in and be the buyer. And so basically when you have all this debt, when the government does this, the government goes into debt. Government is not efficient in paying off the debt, because that's a massive part of Keynesian economic theory is government steps in, goes into debt to be the buyer during the recession. But after the recession, they have a responsibility to pay down the debt. Well, that's great in theory. In practicality, that doesn't work because government doesn't pay down the debt. And that's kind of what led to economic stagnation. From the 1980s, 1990s, and really through the mid-2000s and 2007, you had this neoliberal type mentality. And Bobby, I want you to talk about...
I got something on this. Then Bobby can run with it.
Okay.
Matt, what you're describing there, couldn't that just be described as every facet of government over those periods? Government's role in healthcare, government's role in taxation, government's role in trade, government's role in media, government's role in everything.
Well,
so
yes, they design of system. That's the design of the system. It's not only at a macro level, it's at a minor level. It's not only in terms of government regulations or lack thereof, it's also in terms of trade balance and whatnot. It's also in the regulations to the companies out there producing the goods. And so on and whatnot. And so, when you talk about the neoliberal, though, okay, specifically, Bobby, what is a neoliberal? What is the economic belief system of the neoliberal?
Essentially, a liberal with no soul.
That's a great way to put it, actually.
Yeah. So, I mean, if any, just to continue your line of thought, because you're doing such a great job of explaining it. I probably wouldn't do it any different, or at least the ascending story. If anything that went wrong with the neoliberal phase of economics was the regulation of industry and production and the deregulation of the financial sectors.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean that's really what it comes down to is the way that the influence aggregated demand with just flooding the money the market with money. It really doesn't have any substantial property. It's not based off of anything other than numbers games. And if the numbers don't match up, then you have grave consequences to pay.
Yeah, and when you look at the neoliberal, Tim, basically the neoliberal was born right after the Keynesian economic model. We're talking 1950s, 1960s time, where they really started taking a hold. And
there's a lot of neos in that time. That was when the neo-Marxists were happening.
Yeah. All neo means
a lot of the philosophers I studied.
Neo-Marxists, neo-Nazis, neoliberals, because you had a lot of change, social change, monetary change, you name it. And the only thing that neo means is new. And that's what the new liberal is. And so when Bobby says it's a classic liberal without the soul part, it's the classic liberal without the mother. That's kind of what's happening with the neoliberal, because the neoliberal took from the Keynesian economic perspective. The neoliberal said, you know what? Not only does government not have a right to regulate anything, people who are well off don't have a responsibility to aid anybody. So you had, like Bobby said, there's a deregulation of the financial industry and whatnot. And you basically took, the neoliberal in the 80s took away a lot of the regulatory standpoints that came out of the 30s and 40s that, wanted to stop the depressions from happening and whatnot. And really, when you look at the neoliberal, from 1982 until 2007, the U.S. economy, once the neoliberal took hold, the U.S. economy grew at a faster pace in that 25-year time frame than at any period in the history of the United States. We're talking it literally grew during that time frame more in that 25 years than it did the prior 200 years. Now that sounds really fantastic. The problem with it is that you have this shift in the economic value of social classes. You have the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, because there's no more morality to the economic theory.
Yeah, got it. I mean, and I'm thinking about this, Matt, and bring that forward with the advent of new technology, new communication, new media, and new ability to think outside of the current framework, like Bobby's doing. And how do we move forward as not only a country or a society, but as a globe? And
Bobby, you can kind of talk on this as well, but I want to just kind of look at something here. You've had for centuries an economic theory, correct? What is our economic theory today in 2014?
Specifically?
Yeah. If you had to pinpoint something.
Efficiency, the theory of efficiency. It sounds completely simple and thus sounds stupid, but it literally is a theory based off of the idea of efficiency. I mean, efficiency has a lot more substance to it than just how we use it in everyday language. It is entirely predicated on efficiency because it's about smooth functioning transition of trade, whether it be durable goods, non-durable goods, or resource for that matter. I mean, if anything is an indicator in the macro of macroeconomics of bad things to come is when energy, our base resource, takes a turn. I mean, we're seeing that right now with oil prices dropping. I mean, we are still in the midst of just deciding what that will have, what effect that will have on the macro perspective. Everything that I could come to in my analyzation of it is on the grimmer side of things. There is a way we may correct our way out of it, but I think just a bearish correction is going to come just on the macro level in general.
No, I definitely agree with that.
But even if you started with a state of efficiency, wouldn't efficiency then just breed new inefficiencies?
See, that's the thing. That's the whole basis of the idea is that, like I was telling you with the windmill farm, the wind energy farm, that is an efficient idea to the T to find efficiency. However, completely ineffective. Somehow we have to draw in effectiveness. Effectiveness has a lot to do with spatiality because efficiency in a globalized context, you may be able to quirk ways mathematically to where you are doing something efficient but at very, very great distances, whereas effectiveness would never allow that kind of, extension into I mean, if you're going to build something, let's say, a little shed or something, let's not be efficient and hire a group of people that may not be the best at it, but they're cheap at doing so and do a poor job of it. Maybe it's best that you have Justice Construction roll in there and throw it up a couple guys. From what I understand in that story, is yourself and your brothers, you may have a more effective go at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh my God, this is fun. I did not expect this, Matt. You told me you're bringing on a guy named Bobby, and I'm like, well, there's no Bobby who's an intellectual. We're probably just going to drink beers and hang out.
That's why his name is Robert the Bruce Shannon. Okay, that's why. I do want to say one thing about efficiency, though, and that's one of the things, because I agree with Bobby, but that's one of the things that drives me absolutely crazy to see what's happening in our economic situation. You have Obama, from a government level, really trying to aid the poor and the middle class. He's doing a lot of economic policies to aid the poor and the middle class. But on the other side of it, and that's pure Keynesian. But on the other side of it, you have the Central Bank of the U.S., and they are printing $4.7 trillion, which is going straight to Wall Street. That is pushing the basis of not only Keynesian economic theory, but just basically handing Wall Street and the financial firms trillions and trillions of dollars. And that's not trickling down to the people who need it the most, number one, and the people that really can drive the economy, number two. And so I look at the efficiency of things, and outside of massive manipulation by the Wall Street firms, I don't see much being efficient right now. I see one hand doing one thing, and the other hand, the central bank doing something completely and utterly different. And so it's really kind of leading to this massive confusion of what is our economic theory. And that's why I asked the question, because I don't know what it is right now. I know they're both claiming it's some degree of Keynesian because we're printing money, but that's not to go to, like, you look back to Keynesian. What was Keynesian economic theory? It was the government stepping in to provide jobs. It was the government stepping in to build more roads and infrastructure and bridges it was the workforce programs back in the 1930s. Well, the central bank had never applied Keynesian economic theory outside of lowering interest rates during recessions up until 2008. And now you have the central bank stepping in and doing Keynesian economic theory, and you have the government doing Keynesian economic theory. And I'm like, what the hell is wrong with you? You know, you
just throw neo on there. Why don't we just call it neo-Keynesian?
New Keynesian. That's right. That's right. I think they can all go to hell.
Yeah, I mean, to run with it, the neo-Keynesian implementation is nothing other than like getting into a fix and taking out a predatory loan on yourself and just throwing it to I'll figure it out later kind of thing. And it doesn't provide much of a security of the future.
No,
that is.
No, it does not. You know, we'll continue to delve in the economics of this situation in many other podcasts down the road. I want to kind of bring it home here, and I want to ask each of you one simple question: why is economic theory important? Tim, you start.
Well, to me, it ties in social and political and economic and personal self-improvement. To me, it's just a part of being a human being, is to understand that you are affected by all of these different layers. I meditate. I believe in what Bobby was talking about earlier. Robert the Gray, or whatever you said. We'll have to come up. I'm going to get my own nickname. But I believe what he was saying earlier about giving, and I actually think the world is abundant. We can give and we can still grow. I would love to do that personally. I don't know if it's a moral thing or an ethical thing. I think I'd have to go back and read all my Nietzsche books or maybe burn them to embrace that. But I think that when it comes back to it, economic theory is a part of understanding the world at a small level, at a large level, at a global level, and even internally. I studied politics in college. I love philosophy. I could sit around and talk about John Rawls, The Veil of Ignorance, and Foucault, and I love that. I'm a nerd that way. I love that kind of content and that kind of discussion. So to me, Matt, part of it just takes me back to being human, because these discussions get your brain to start thinking, okay, outside of I got to drive home tonight, or what am I going to get for dinner? It gets you to start thinking about the world in a more complicated way. And you don't have to, obviously, we're not going to solve the world's problems on the Trading Justice podcast here tonight.
Why not?
But the conversation is the part of getting to a better solution, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Small conversations like this, getting people to think, getting people to talk, getting people to consume media that's not necessarily just, corporatized media. Start thinking outside of what is just being pounded down your face all the time. So economic theory, I don't know if we have a label for it right now. I think we'll continue this conversation plenty in the future. But it's all those things I just talked about, because it's so tied to politics. You mentioned a guy earlier in the podcast, John Locke. Well, guess what? If you go into any philosophy, economic, political history book, John Locke's in there, because these people who think this way, they are actually tied into all of these different fields, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, there's so much overlap between them. So anyway, no, it's a lot of fun tonight. This was a fun one.
No, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Bobby, last thoughts on the economy and economic theory.
Well, the way I see it is it's the identification of the landscape. I mean, as the landscape is. For one, you get to identify the let's just go with the analogy, the plants that occupy this area, but you get to learn what things are. Also how to name things. If you touch a hot pan and you burn yourself, if you don't ever learn what hot is and what that means and able to associate it, you live in fear your whole life. And that's the whole point of understanding economic theory, is because it gives names to all these things that you see that puts you in living situations, whether that be poverty or whether that be riches, what have you. But it's very, very important to have an understanding of what the future heralds, what's coming with it. And economic theory, that gives rise to that shows you from at least the financial aspect or the work aspect of life, what comes to pass. And for human beings, that's what made us different than animals. This is very innate and very intricate knowledge of the future, which is also why religion is one of the most powerful institutions in the world, is because it secures your future. It tells you, be a good person, and at the end of the day, everything's going to be taken care of.
Yeah.
But, from a cultural and human perspective, you have to be very aware of economic theory and what, the economy is doing, because it'll tell you whether you should be worried about something and maybe change your life or figure out a new route, but it also will tell you that, good things are to come, and you can, embark on ventures that you usually may not be able to in a bad economy. I mean, just in the short gist, it gives you an idea of what the future brings.
I love what both you just said. The only thing I'll say, because I can't say it better than what you two just did, but the only thing I'm going to say is this: if you don't understand what drives the marketplace, if you don't understand what drives the economy, if you don't understand the economic system design, as Bobby would put it, then how in the world can you be efficient in that system? How in the world can you not be taken advantage of by the people who understand what's going on, who understand what's going on Wall Street, understand how the economy drives price action, understand what low interest rates means and how to take advantage of it. So from a selfish, self-interest level, it's important to understand what's going on from an economic standpoint, so that you can take advantage of it for yourself. Because at the end of the day, going back to classic liberalism, it really started with the self-interest, the self-individual, picking yourself up, and it had really more to do with yourself than it had anything else, and your own performance, being that fatherly figure, so to speak, your own performance in the economic design. So you've been listening to the Trading Justice Podcast, presented by Tackle Trading.
You've been listening to the Trading Justice Podcast. If you've enjoyed yourself and think that the conversations and topics we've covered are important, help spread the word. Give us your feedback. 5 stars on iTunes, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter. The Trading Justice Podcast is proudly sponsored by TackleTrading.com. Get off the sidelines and get in the game.